Next speaker is Len Swatkowski. Len joined Plumbing Manufacturers International as Technical Director in June of 2011, where he is responsible for analyzing and reporting on proposed legislation, codes, standard changes, and certification agencies, and coordinating with industry peers. Prior to joining PMI, Len was a program manager for Jarden Consumer Solutions in Boca Raton, Florida, where he directed the U.S. and Asian staff in the home environment segment. Len holds BSMET, MBA, and MSMET degrees from Western Illinois University and is a certified Six Sigma Black Belt. Welcome, Len Swatkowski.
Well, first I'd like to thank IAPMO and World Plumbing Council for having me here. I recently was surprised to find through the recently released 1940 census that my grandfather, who had immigrated from Ireland in the 1920s, was a plumber. So I think it goes full circle now. I'm going to talk about measuring sustainability, credibility, and accountability for sustainability. The problem statement, as you can see, is that we need to define a credible and transparent method to measure environmental accountability for our products. And this has been clear since even before the Brundtland Commission and the publication of Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. The difficulty in doing this lies in the accountability that consumers and customers, which are different, can see in the value of giving them the sustainability of the product. The presentation will attempt to look at the aspects of current life cycle analysis and sustainability and look how global efforts, places, different industries around the world are looking to measure this and give this information to consumers and the consuming public. And it's still a complex and politically charged process. What I'll go through today in my outline is to list the main drivers for developing sustainability standards. If you've ever presented an idea to your management that's going to cost money, the first question you get is from the financial manager, financial VP, what's going to happen if we don't do this? If we don't do this, we don't spend this money, what will happen? And that's what we're looking at. PMI in the plumbing industry is at the beginning of looking at sustainability, life cycle analysis, eco-labeling, how we address this through our products, and how we're going to present this to the consuming public and our customers. I'll also look at defining the critical aspects in considering measuring sustainability, product classes that have to be defined, the attributes, the accuracy, and accreditation and certification that we will need to do to maintain this into the future. We'll look at some aspects of developing a sustainability standard. Some of the industries that have already done this or are in the beginning or middle process of doing this, and looking at closing statements on the entire process. Grow, Harlem, Brundtland. This quote has been used over and over when we look at the green efforts that have been going on around the world, the green standards and labeling efforts that have been going on for 20, 30 years. Sustainable development as defined for the report to the United Nations titled Our Common Future, which was published in 1987. Sustainable development is a kind of development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Something interesting or something important to point out is the federal government's commitment to sustainability as well. It starts at the top. Executive Order 13514, which was signed by the President on October 5th, 2009, as part of the Recovery Act, noted that it required federal agencies to set 2020 greenhouse gas emissions reduction impacts with targets within 90 days of that executive order, looking at energy efficiency, their fleet, fuel consumption, conserve water, reduce waste, support sustainable development in communities, and leverage federal purchasing power to promote environmentally responsible products and technologies. It's important to note when you're looking at sustainability, and we'll get into some of the definitions that are starting to gel and be more consistent throughout this discussion, that you'll hear the term triple bottom line. And as noted in that directive, it points out all three of those efforts minimize negative environmental impacts, are safe for employees, and economically sound. That's the triple bottom line of sustainability. You can call it social, environmental, or economic. You call them social profit, environmental profit, or economic profit. Or you can also use the word budgets for each one of those three. What it comes down to is people, planet, and profitability. And they all work together to accomplish the same goals in achieving sustainability. The Department of Commerce has also defined sustainable development as a creation of manufactured products that use processes that minimize negative environmental impacts, conserve energy, and are economically sound, also pointing out the triple bottom line that is noted in many sustainability processes. In measuring sustainability, there's drivers that push this. In Europe, the focus has been on what we call environmental product, I'll get this right yet, EPDs. Environmental Product Declarations, trying to get my acronym straight. That's one of the ones that you'll hear more and more. In Europe, they're working in two areas relative to plumbing products, eco-tapware and eco-sanitary ware. The eco-tapware standard is focused on products that dispense hot and cold water. The basis for life cycle analysis is the heating energy used during its use cycle. The product life during the use phase, looking at what they have determined is the product life in their market and application to their products, and looking at the baseline of estimates and total water use for the hot and cold proportions used during its life. A North American version would need to use data that's relevant to our usage patterns, which are different. The European eco-tapware standard only assesses energy to heat the water to 140 degrees, which is not an issue residentially in the U.S., but misses the energy used to pump the water to its point of use and to treat the water after it's used, something that's under consideration in total cradle-to-cradle assessments of sustainability. And it also assumes generally that faucets and shower heads are recycled for metal content, something we'll look at end of life. The eco-sanitary ware standard is looking at fixtures. The European life characteristics are noted. In the U.S., the National Association of Home Builders expects the lifetime as unlimited for toilets. It may or may not be realistic, but that's how they note it. 10 years on flush and fill valve mechanisms and 22.5 years for urinals. That's important to note what the life characteristics are because that has an impact on what their sustainability is. The use phase is approximately 6 liters or 1.6 gallons for water closets, and total energy consumption is looked at as in distribution as 1 times, use phase 2 times, and manufacturing 4 times as far as their relative impact on the life cycle. So it's pretty clear to see that the in-use phase of the tapware, faucets, shower heads, is where the biggest impact is on the environment for the fittings, the terminal fittings. As far as the sanitary products, the more important point of the life cycle to focus on is an actual manufacturing of the product itself and distribution. The industry initiative, here's where we come up with answering the guy from finance who's going to say, what happens if we don't do this? Development of sustainability and standard continues in the absence of any forced regulations. This is important to note. Industries want to be proactive. They want to own this process. They want to stay ahead of any regulatory requirements that come out, because this is something that's very important to each manufacturer. The manufacturers are into water, into hot water. They're deeper than water. They want to be able to show that their responsibility extends not only to the consumers buying and using their products, but also to their design and manufacture and distribution of the products. And many companies are driven by senior management or board directives that require them to set and maintain sustainability goals that are continually improved. Knowing the value and need for sustainability, the industries that have been doing this have taken a leadership role in this, as the plumbing industry has as well. Much of this has been done already. I mean, we've had drives for things like lean manufacturing from back in the late 70s, early 90s, when James Womack came out and coined the phrase lean manufacturing. You know, looking at a value stream assessment of a product. As engineers or designers within manufacturing concerns, you had a responsibility for the quality and the cost of the product, but also its environmental impact and the resources it used. So when you're doing a value stream assessment of a product, you're looking at everything from mining the ore to creating whatever the raw materials are going into your products, through how long those products sit in that value stream, because that ties up free cash flow. And that has a real economic impact, but by reducing it, you not only save those costs involved in doing business, but you also improve the profitability of the company and the environmental impact by reducing the amount of waste and reducing the amount of resources and square footage, for instance, that you might need to get products to the market. This isn't a new concept, lean design and manufacturing. I've seen some places where Eli Whitney is actually credited with being one of the forefathers of being involved in lean, since he was one of the first that came up with standardized parts and mass assembly in 1799, building muskets for the U.S. government. We've all heard of the Ford system in the early 1900s, where Ford started mass assembly to create a car, an automobile that was accessible and affordable to the population. And the Toyota system and the mandates, or the theories of Duran and Deming, that led up to lean design, lean manufacturing, and lean products. So sustainability isn't really a new concept. It's a new term for something we've been doing for a long time. And it does meet that triple bottom line. It saves the environment, it creates a better working environment for people, and it's an economically driven exercise as well. Looking at some of the aspects, this is where it gets a little bit fuzzy. This is a gray area to some extent. The types of eco-labeling and environmental directives are noted up here from the IEC. Type 1 eco-label under ISO 1424 looks at an eco-label logo on a product that meets specifications, independently audited, considers life cycle environmental impacts for the whole product. I think an example of this would be Energy Star, WaterSense, as far as Type 1. Type 2 eco-label under ISO 14020 are self-declarations. My product uses 20% less than my average or the industry average, or something that they claim on their own. Type 3 is the most restrictive and requires that third parties and involve independent audits, which require information about environmental impacts associated with the product or service, such as raw material acquisition, energy use or efficiency, and content of materials, chemical substance. This looks at entire cradle-to-cradle performance of something, and in some regards to Type 3, tries to put an assessment on every product in the marketplace, so there's some effort to try to level out toothpaste with a roller skate. So you're looking at trying to compare dissimilar products on a level playing field. But it also has some aspects of it where you compromise things that really need to be focused, as we've already, or as I've already pointed out, the difference between the terminal fittings and the fixtures. Steps towards the sustainability standard. There's a couple slides looking at some of the steps we're going through. Set goals and scope. Now, all these statements could be months, weeks and months of work, so it's important to note that this process is general in how it gets done. After setting the goals and scopes, which we hope to do this within the plumbing industry within the next month or so, is do a scoping meeting. Define the process and the stakeholders. How are the stakeholders going to get defined? Is it a consensus process? Is it something you do isolated from the rest of all stakeholders? Or is it a compromise in between? Create a definition of the sustainable product systems, product category rules. We'll get into that in a little bit. And make an environmental product declaration. And an EPD, or environmental product declaration, is an eco-label based on life cycle assessment. Define the system boundaries for the life cycle scenario. How far do you go back? How far do you bring it forward? You're multiple sourcing many of the parts that go into your products. You might have 10, 15. One company I work with had 85,000 SKUs. You know, trying to get this kind of assessment done for something like that is not only a tremendous burden, but may not provide the benefit to the overall consuming public and your customers, but categorize things so you can handle things as a group. And a look at conducting life cycle inventory and life cycle impact analysis. Again, in the process, looking at additional steps, use the sustainability system to do a strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats, or SWOT analysis on the entire system. Look at the key impact areas from the results. Find out where the problems are. Find out what the solutions are to those. Prioritize those solutions. And here's it's in a few words. It says, implement a standard and accreditation program. And right after that should be inserted, and then a miracle occurs. Because this is a long, arduous process, taking into account not only the needs of the customer and consumers in the industry, but the stakeholders that are also involved. And this is one that sometimes touched on and sometimes is not, is the innovation part of a sustainability system. Innovation really means how do you continuously improve the process so you make it better. You get better information to people. You set the bar lower. You get to a point where it hits here, let's make it a little bit better. And measure and report progress. It's part of the transparency involved with the sustainability program. Here's some examples of things. I've been talking to people in other industries. Some of them are in the audience here, and I haven't included all of them, but if you look at the attributes, the key product attributes that are listed here, where the tile industry, carpet industry, flooring, appliance industry, and the things they're looking at to assess what their sustainability goals are and where they start, they're different. They're all different. A lot of them take into account things like manufacturing and the life management, but you can see they're all looking at different things based on how homogeneous their products are and how that message is going to get communicated to the consuming public and their customers. I'm going to try running through these pretty quick because the panel's going to have a lot more interest than what I'm talking about here as far as sustainability. But looking at some of the attributes, looking at the raw materials, what's the energy needed to mine, refine, deliver? Where are you getting raw materials from? How many different parts of the world are they coming? Can you even trace them? Looking at the impact to life and human life quality, social compliance issues that can be addressed just in the raw materials aspect. The manufacturing, as far as we see in a lot of our products, the manufacturing part of that process is big. But it's also a costly one, and it pays us to continue to reduce what the impacts are during our manufacturing process. And like I said, much of that has been addressed through lean efforts over the last 30 years. Looking at attributes like transportation. Are the transportation costs of energy offset by something else that's being done wherever you're bringing the products in from? Packaging is also a big thing. Many of the big box retailers right now also take into account what are the packaging materials that you use. Are they recyclable? Are they sustainable? Have they been recycled already? What type of inks do you use? Can you minimize the impact for that? So people are already involved in doing these things and have been for some time with many of the retailers that feel just as passionate about sustainability as the manufacturers themselves. Looking at the product attributes, looking at its life characteristics, how long is it going to last, how easy is it to repair. Now, some of our products we've had out there 50, 60, 80, maybe some cases over 100 years still work fine. Installation and maintenance. How is that? How easy it is to repair during the life, and the impact to different parts of, how far do you have to drive to repair it? Where are the parts coming from? The replacement parts. It can get very, very complex. Corporate governance. This is one that's difficult to assess. Worker safety, ISO 22000, ISO 26000, social compliance issues. A lot of the retailers and manufacturers already have internal social compliance audits that they do in plants that they buy from around the world. And there are retailers that also do this, and if you fail their social compliance audits, you lose the business. You can lose it overnight if you don't meet their requirements for worker safety and the way that employees are managed in the workplace. And the life management, a tough one. We've all walked into Lowe's, Home Depot. We see the battery recycling bins when you walk in the door. You see places, the gas stations, they'll take your used oil. We're going to see something like that, and there's enough recoverable material, mostly in the copper alloys that we're using, so we assume people are recycling those. But what about everything else? Are they getting recycled? Are they getting reused? It's something we need to address, at least within the plumbing industry as well. And innovation I talked about a little bit as far as keeping the process fresh and using continuous improvement principles to make it better. Measurables, looking at the attributes for mandatory and elective requirements. This gets into kind of a lead kind of a process. What things do you have to do? Which things are optional? Looking at a scorecard. Determination of rating or ratings. One of the things we're attempting to do is to try to keep this from becoming an arms race. We want to show where products are meeting sustainability goals and promote that. But we don't want this to be an arms race that can confuse the consumer and perhaps destroy all the work that goes into showing the sustainability efforts that have gone into place. Working with third-party labs for conformity assessment with accreditation, and continuing to add more accrediting bodies to that meet the requirements that are set by the program. The process that establishes your stakeholders. Who are your stakeholders? Are they government, non-government organizations, and people within industry? Is it balanced? Do you bring a level of credibility to the process? Which is the next point, looking at keeping it, continuously improving it. Doing audits of the certifiers, that's part of your accreditation program. The final goal, keep it transparent and representative of the entire industry. Stakeholders need to continue on involvement in the process to make it, keep it credible not only within the industry but to the consuming public. And it needs to be translated into clear, simple to understand value to consumers and customers. That is the major obstacle we're dealing with now. What is the value to the consuming public for this? Conclusions. Industry is working at defining the task of measuring and improvement our resource use. The task is not simple, but it needs to be transparent, credible, and clear to understand for all stakeholders. Most water-using product industries are in initial phases of developing their sustainability requirements. Like I said, in plumbing industry, it appears that the water, the energy use and the use phase for faucets and shower heads is the key. The ecotox and health issues with materials is minimized as far as we can see, since we get sometimes weekly, if not monthly, changes. We're continuously improving that to remove these materials, and we'll eventually remove any materials of concern and has a minor impact on the overall sustainability of cradle to cradle. Sinks, water closets, urinals, the energy to manufacture is the key to looking at the sustainability aspect there. Pipe and pipe fitting materials, there's people from the pipe industry that are looking at this. They are more looking at the materials of construction and their manufacturing process and where their sustainability efforts need to go. And the life, we talked about that. That's the critical part that we need to come to terms with. And we're working with the EU and several other associations and industry groups around the world to try to make this a common process between all plumbing industries. Conclusions, where are we starting? Well, you can see where we're starting. We're just buying the book. We're trying to write the book on sustainability. Well, where are we going to be? We're taking the migration path from not knowing enough to becoming experts, and our dream space to get to is to make sure that eventually someday our uses equal our renewed resources. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
We have time for questions, and I see Bill Hoffman has a question back there.
Fascinating presentation, Lynn.
Thanks.
You know, one of the things that I've been reading a lot of corporate sustainability reports lately, and also looking at ISO 14000 series, the 40 numbers on the back end of it like this. I'm seeing a lot of good progress being made there. One of the things I didn't see in your slides on the sustainability part was every one of those has a water component in it. And I know Weyerhaeuser is now published in their sustainability report how many gallons per ton of paper, and they show their nice little graph going down. Budweiser and the company that bought them out has gallons of water per gallons of beer, and et cetera. And where do you see that going on the for the plumbing manufacturers? Obviously doing the same things.
Absolutely. And speaking on behalf of the plumbing industry, I'd say about half of PMI's members are family owned and half are publicly held, but both equally put those type of reports out. I've recently did a quick audit of the websites, and they're saving, you know, you can add zeros and numbers, millions of gallons, millions of kilowatts, but they're doing things when they test a lot of products. They test products that use water. I don't know of one that doesn't recycle their water within house, that they keep that water filtered, reused to check for life cycle testing and that, and also to recycle their materials. I mean, brass has been recycled forever, but a lot of people are taking their vitreous, crushing it, and helping it use in local municipalities for doing road beds. And I could go on, even places where employees get involved with recycling with the plant too. So it's happening, but the list is very long. And within our 28 members right now, there's a lot of that that's already occurred.
We have one more question.
Yeah, Len, here I'm talking from with my contractor's hat on. Has there been thought from your organization about the differences in regions of this country as far as as the sustainability issue goes? Meaning that what's might be needed to be built in Minnesota wouldn't necessarily be needed in South Florida. You know, as far as the depth of bury on certain things and the frost and the freezing protection, things like that, that might have something to do with how the product is made. And would you get more or less credit if you're doing something in Minnesota rather than Florida?
That's difficult to answer. Energy rates are going to vary. Of course, it makes more sense building an aluminum plant next to a hydroelectric facility for the cost and the reuse of energy. That gets, when sustainability first got a lot of attention in Europe during after the Kyoto Protocol and Rio Convention, there was an effort to start labeling right away in the early 90s. And the French and Swedish steel manufacturers wanted to make sure their steel was more efficient because of the renewable resources they used for their products, and the Germans would be knocked because of their use of fossil fuel. So it can get down to where your energy comes from, the part of the world, whether or not you have to heat or air condition a plant. I think those are things that need to be dealt with, but they need to be dealt with holistically. The entire facility is how they reduce their resources needed to create and test the product and get it to the marketplace and distribute it for that point, because of transportation costs and fuel there. So I think that'll be taken into account during the assessments that they're looking at each individual plant, but it's going to be up to that facility to reduce those resource uses.
Thank you, Len.
Okay, thank you.
It's now time for